Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net Tarot, the sister channel to the Diamond Net. And today's video is all about my perspective on what tarot is and why it's helpful for inner exploration. Alright, so there's one disclaimer that I wanted to go into before I start this video on what tarot is and why it works. And I wanted to give the disclaimer that this is just my perspective. This is coming from somebody who is not psychic or clairvoyant, and I don't have any clairs in any way, shape, or form. Essentially, what I use the tarot for is a bit of a framing device to be able to mine meaning out of situations through the visual language of the tarot. Now, this is my perspective, so you can find many other tarot readers with different philosophies on how to read the tarot. But if you're in a similar position to me, like where you don't have any psychic abilities, you don't have like clairaudience, clairvoyance, any of that, and you would like to use the tarot but you feel like, oh, I need to be psychic first in order to do that, I would say that there's no problem there. You can read the tarot regardless of psychic abilities or lack thereof. Also, for anybody who has an allergy to anything that's too woo-woo, you can also use tarot cards in a more secular, psychological way as well, and they, in my opinion, are just as helpful when looked at through that lens because the meaning is still there. Alright, so now that I have that disclaimer out of the way, what is tarot? So, in the simplest terms, the tarot is a 78 card deck of cards with archetypal images on them. So what I mean by an archetypal image is that they have a certain archetype on the card. So what an archetype is, it's a common pattern, symbol, or theme that's shared across human cultures and across time periods. And so essentially the images on the cards have a certain inherent meaning to our psyche, which is why I had mentioned earlier that it's a psychologically helpful tool, not dissimilar from a Rorschach test, in that we can look into the card and we can find a meaning in it. Now, in a sense, it's a bit of an inverted Rorschach test because it already supplies you with an archetypal image, which automatically gives you more of a connection to the subconscious, and it allows you to see things from angles that you wouldn't otherwise consider. And so in this way, the tarot cards act as a kind of vehicle for being able to explore the unconscious mind and to have a connection to the collective unconscious. So the significance of an archetype is that the archetypes essentially, they reside in our collective unconscious. And so by their very nature, our psyche has a link to those things. And if we can see an image on the card, it shifts us more into a narrative mode where we're orienting to ourselves and to the situations in life through those archetypes. So it supplies a kind of map or a kind of framing device for being able to understand the issues that are going on in a way that's different than we would typically approach them. You know, usually modern people tend to think in rational, linear kind of ways, but this is a more holistic narrative kind of way of looking at things. And so it engages that narrative kind of learning that's so primary to us, but that we've, as modern people, have gotten so far away from. And so it essentially gets us more connected to our emotions, more connected to wisdom, and more connected to that aspect of ourself that understands things in a more integrative and holistic kind of way. Tarot is basically like its own mix and match personalized narrative. It's a mix and match personalized myth. And it can be essentially sussed out and kind of pulled apart in the same way that the symbols in a myth can be. So an example would be, let's take Sleeping Beauty, which is a very common story. So basically there's a young lady who is cursed, and she basically is cursed to sleep until a prince comes to wake her up. And basically she falls asleep and the prince comes and he slays the dragon and he kisses her and it wakes her up. And so symbolically, this represents something that never happened, but that is always happening. This is something that I read in a book about myths once, and I thought it was a really, really good quote. A myth is something that has never happened, but is always happening in the psyche. It's always happening internally. And so if we look at Sleeping Beauty through that lens, what Sleeping Beauty represents within ourselves is the waiting potential of the subconscious mind, the waiting potential of what we don't yet know, the thing that is just being. And then what the prince represents is essentially our conscious mind and our journey to awaken those aspects of ourself that are unconscious. And in order to do that, you have to slay dragons, and you have to get the fire, the transformative fire from the dragon, to be able to have that impact on the waiting potential within ourselves. So in the same way that we can suss out a deeper meaning in this myth, we can do the same thing with the tarot, which is chock full of a similar type of symbolism. So this reveals a bit of the secret of the tarot. Every single one of the tarot cards has an archetypal image on it, has a mythical image. And because of that, they're things that never happened, but are always happening internally. And so essentially, no matter which tarot card you pull, you're going to have something, somewhere where you can find something relevant within yourself. And in this way, I think it's very important to realize that the journey to that insight is very, very important. So you might pull up a tarot card for yourself if you're reading the tarot, and you think, oh, I don't necessarily see the connection there between this card and my situation. Potentially, these cards that seem so far apart, you can actually have more insights spring up from it, because you have to try to find a way, and you have to look deeper to actually find where the connections actually lie. And so, because all tarot cards are always relevant to everyone all the time, the trickier cards can often give us the meanings that we are not necessarily conscious of. And this is precisely why the tarot is such a good tool for inner exploration. You can use the tarot as essentially a tool for mining various tidbits of wisdom, insights, and even creative insights. And that's something I plan to do more videos on in the future on this channel, is I want to make videos on using tarot for creative writing, which is usually, it's not something that I've seen very often on tarot channels, but you can absolutely use that to find different ideas. And so what the tarot is if you can imagine the internal landscape as like this vast desert that's really, really difficult to get through on foot. What the tarot is, it basically is like a vehicle that you can use to get through the tough landscapes and to find your way into areas that you wouldn't otherwise look. Now, having said this, there is a practice that I like to do. I like to assume a sense of synchronicity in the cards. I like to imagine that reality is reflecting to me or to the querent something that is relevant to them. And oftentimes I have had, in a reading with somebody else, I've had these uncanny situations pop up where it felt like every single card I was pulling was just perfectly on the nose for me or for the querent. And, so I tend to chalk that up to a kind of synchronicity, almost like the outside world and the internal world have this kind of connection, where the outside will work to mirror whatever is necessary for me or the other person to grow the most. So I like to assume that. Now, I say I assume that because I don't know this for sure, but I also don't know it's not true. And so what I tend to like to do is I like to be a fence sitter on this issue and to be very open-handed when it comes to believing or not believing anything. I like to remain open-minded, and this is a very helpful process for me. Now, again, if you're somebody who is a bit more, like I said, allergic to the woo-woo factor, what you can do is you can essentially just frame it as, whatever's helpful for you in the reading. Whatever helps you kind of let go and be able to use the tool, because the tarot is essentially a tool. And so if being able to believe that, all of tarot is just probabilistic and all of the cards are just psychological tools that, it's all going to relate, if that's helpful, then I recommend going with that. If it's helpful for you to assume there's a sense of synchronicity, then I recommend going with that. If it's helpful for you to think of these as insights coming up from some clairvoyant kind of thing, I recommend going with that, especially if that feels right to you in your experience. But I also recommend having an open-handed kind of belief around the tarot, and that way you can integrate all of those meanings, and it's not like you just have to look at things from one vantage point. So basically, do whatever is helpful for you to be able to actually use the tarot as a vehicle for the intuition. Alright, so I want to show you how this mix and match fairy tale kind of works. So in a sense, what it is, it's a teaching story, it's a fable, it's something that I can derive a kind of wisdom about it, some kind of insight that I might not have realized otherwise. And so what I did is I created a 3-card spread, and I'll explain what each one of the cards is beforehand. So the first card is the significator card. And that is basically representing me in my present state right now. So it's basically maybe my feelings, my attitudes, things that are going on in my life, that type of thing. The second card is the influence card. So it's how did I become this way? So basically, what factors have led me to becoming the way that I am in the significator card? And the third card is where can I go from here? So what is my wisest path forward? All right, so I'm going to go ahead, I'll take my cards out. I always keep them in this little pouch. It's just a lot easier to keep them in a pouch versus the original card packaging because those get messed up, especially with kids around. They'd be too interested in that. All right, so I'm going to shuffle it real quick. And I'm just going to pick 3 cards at random. All right, so I'll just cut the deck a few different ways. This is normally not how I do it, but I'm going to do it this way for the sake of the video. Cut the deck again, and then I'll cut the deck again. Okay. All right, so I have these 3 cards right here. So the top one is going to be my significator card. That's the one that shows where I'm at in my present state. Okay, so basically I have here the 7 of Pentacles. So with the 7 of Pentacles card, basically it shows this guy here, and he is trying to harvest, you know, what he's got. He's trying to harvest his crops, and he feels like maybe it's a bit of a meager yield. Now with the Pentacles, those are actually coins. So they represent things like money and work and all things of the earthly and the mundane. And so maybe in a sense in this card it could show that he's maybe not too happy with his financial situation, and he's feeling like he is yielding, you know, some meager yield of some kind, and he wished that there was more. Now the 7 card in the minor arcana, as this is a minor arcana card right here, is a reflective of the 7 card in the major arcana, which is the Chariot card. And with the Chariot card, basically that's all about bringing together 2 opposing forces and making them work to go in the same direction as one another. So basically it's kind of like using 2 things that you wouldn't think that you would be able to use to make things better. And so this this idea of bringing together 2 unlikely things are reflected in all of the 7s in the deck. So basically what we have here is maybe reflective of my current situation financially. Like maybe I'm not extremely happy with where I'm at. Now in a sense 7 is not exactly the most meager number, so there's only 10 cards, you know, in the suit, you know, in terms of like number cards go. And so 7 is a bit more than average, but he's still quite unpleased. And so maybe it's in a sense reflecting maybe me feeling like I need more money than I actually do to live a comfortable life. Maybe it's telling me something about needing to be more modest with my means, or happier about the fruit that I do actually harvest. Or it could be maybe I'm displeased with the amount that I have, but I could actually try something that's unexpected, bringing those 2 opposing forces in the Chariot together to actually make my yield much better. And so if I look at like little details in the cards, he's also got maybe some pinkish reddish land right here. So maybe there's some untilled soil or some kind of soil that is a bit foreign to me, like I'm not sure what it is. You know, so maybe there was something I didn't consider doing, something a bit strange that I could maybe use for my own benefit. Okay, so the next card is the influence card. Usually what I do with the influence card is I place it here. All right, so what I have is I have the reversal of the 8 of Wands. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll put this down. So this is what has influenced me to be like this fella right here, feeling like I have some kind of meager yield, wishing I had more, maybe not seeing the potential opportunities that are there financially or work-wise, or perhaps even relative to material gain. And so this is the 8 of Wands. So the Wands as a suit are representative of trailblazing new paths. So essentially it can be new career paths, new relationship paths, new spiritual paths particularly. Now, I forgot to mention this, the pentacles are associated with the element of earth, and so this has to do with everything earthly and mundane. Now with the wands, these are associated with the element of fire, and so there's that transformation element going on here. And so there's always something about something new here. It's all about trailblazing new things. Now with the eights in the minor arcana, they all reflect the 8 in the major arcana, and that is the strength card. And it shows this maidenly woman that has tamed a lion. And she has done so not by brute force, but because she has learned the lion, learned to become one with the lion. So it's like this higher and lower connection between the animalistic and the instinctive, and the higher and the divine and the reasonable and the rational. And all of these things working together as one and creating a sense of ease out of the situation. And so the strength card, that element of strength, inner strength, is reflective in all of the 8 cards in the minor arcana as well. So with this one, basically we have all of these different wands, 8 different wands, 8 different new paths all coming at once. And so if this were an upright card, I would say like it would be reflective of, oh, I'm taking on so many things at once, you know? But in a sense, what this shows is that maybe I'm not willing to take on too many things, which certainly could influence, you know, the fact that maybe I'm feeling my yield is quite meager here, or feeling like I could have done better or done more, and feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not quite reaping the benefits that I was hoping to reap. And so, essentially, what I have here is I have maybe this unwillingness and maybe a fear of taking on too much, keeping me from actually having the yield that I want. And so this resistance to taking on all of these new paths has maybe led me to not try out those new ideas that the Chariot card reflects, of like, oh, trying out different ways of trying to grow my money situation or grow my business. All right, so that's the influence card. So, and the third card has to do with what is the wisest path from here? Like, what can I do to actually, instead of having like a little bit of, oh man, my finances aren't that great, what can I actually do to help with that situation? All right, so I have here the 4 of Swords. Now the swords are indicative of the element of air. And the air element has to do with thought and beliefs and ideas and reflection as well. Now the 4 card in the minor arcana is reflective of the Emperor card in the major arcana. And the Emperor is all about strategic thinking, and he's kind of the father of the deck. And essentially, the mother of the deck is the 3rd card in the deck, and that is the Empress. And she's all about taking the first step on a new journey. The Emperor is about finding your way to the first milestone on that new journey. So he is indicative of the first milestone. And so there's this element of reflection after meeting a milestone on each of the 4 cards in the minor arcana. So we have here this guy. He's sitting up on top of a coffin. He has 1 sword to his side, and he has 3 swords pointed down at him. And you can tell that he is actually in a church. Now, a bit of background that I know about this practice that's shown in this card is that in some culture, and I forget which culture it was, I feel like it was a medieval culture. Basically, what they would do is they would send the young men away for war. And if they came back alive, what they would have them do is they'd have them sit in a coffin that was made for them. And that way they could actually reflect on, oh, I could actually very well be dead and in this coffin. And so it was somewhat of a meditative practice and a reflective practice after reaching the milestone of coming home from battle. And so in this way, just this reflection on life and on death and on how you want to actually spend your life. And so in a sense, what it seems to be reflecting to me as a good path forward is maybe to take some time, slow down, figure out what it is that's maybe stopping me from wanting to go down these new paths, or that's making me feel like my finances or my work situation is inadequate. And essentially being able to pull that apart and really sussing out what's most important in life. Like, perhaps I don't need more money. Maybe I do have an adequate amount of money here. And perhaps I don't need to even take on these new paths, so that there is a good reason for there to be a bit of a resistance there. And so basically what it's recommending is to do some silent reflection, maybe some meditation, something quiet something that contemplates on life. So as you can see, you have here these 3 cards, and they tell a very specific kind of story. And again, it has that probabilistic quality where we could assume a sense of synchronicity in the cards, and we can find the connection no matter what the card is. Like, I guarantee if I pick any card in this deck, I can find a way that it relates back to my life. And through that, it is a helpful framing device for being able to mine insights. And so basically, on this channel, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going into different ways of using the tarot for mining personal and creative insights, and using it to get more in touch with wisdom and more in touch with the subconscious mind. And so if this is something that you're interested in, I highly recommend subscribe to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like it, share it. If you have friends who are interested in tarot or you think they would, share it to them. Also, I have a main channel called The Diamond Net, where I go over more general spiritual topics and consciousness-based topics in general, things like shadow work and the like. So if you're interested in that type of thing, I highly recommend signing up for that if you haven't already. Also, I do offer personal tarot readings if you're interested. I'll leave the link in the description box below and also in the comments section. I also offer dream work coaching and life coaching as well if you're looking for something like kind of on an ongoing basis, sort of a strategic partnership to kind of help gain a sort of sense of clarity through being able to facilitate looking at things from different angles, like in a one-on-one Skype conversation. And then from there, basically having a strategic partner where you can then take action steps and have a bit of a motivation behind doing it. And if you have any questions about any of these services, feel free to email me at thediamondnetchannel@gmail.com. And, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I also will have, like I said, the links down in the description box in the comments section. And basically, I have just little snippets, like bits of information about each of those services. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the video. That's all I have for now. And I hope to see you again next week.